You are listening to Prophet Pearls with Nehemia Gordon and Keith Johnson, exploring biblical prophecy for yesterday, today, and tomorrow.
Welcome back to Prophet Pearls. This is Keith Johnson along with Nehemia Gordon, face to face in the land of Israel, and I've got great news. My suitcase has arrived, which means Nehemia is going to be in a lot better mood because I'm going to smell a lot better. But we are here,
Amen.
And it's so funny. We got the suitcase. Nehemia noticed that on my suitcase, it actually said Rush, which clearly I think they must have thought it really didn't mean that. But either way, finally it's here, and so we're going to record this one, which is one of my favorite sections, actually, Nehemia. We're going to be in 2 Samuel chapter 6, verse 1 through 7, verse 17. The Maccabees, our special Prophet Pearl sponsors, are helping us out with this. Hey, Maccabees, we appreciate you. We're in the land of the Maccabees, about to go into this wonderful passage. So, Nehemia, let's get this party started.
Yeah, you say this is your favorite passage. I'm counting 50 favorite passages, Keith.
No, I'm nowhere near the amount of passages.
All right.
Anyway, the reason it's one of my favorites is because I just love I love this opportunity when you get a chance to go into history and you kind of see these things that connect and just with everything we've already studied. So it's 2 Samuel chapter 6 verse 1 starting.
Well, and can I just tell people that we always encourage them to go look at the parallel in Chronicles when there is one?
Yes.
So here 2 Samuel chapter 6, the parallel is 1 Chronicles chapter 13 beginning in verse 1.
How about the Prophet Pearls? About the Torah Pearls section? What's the connection?
Okay, so here the Torah Pearls, let's see, is the portion of Shemini, which is Leviticus 9:1 to 11:47.
Mm-hmm.
And there it's talking about, it's Leviticus. It's, those commandments related to the ritual around the tabernacle.
Yeah, you memorized that stuff. You have that stuff too. Yeah. Anyway, hey, I'm learning a lot here, folks. You should know I'm here with Nehemia. And one of the things that when we're doing radio shows from different parts of the world, you basically get together and you do exactly what you do. You spend an hour and a half or whatever recording. One of the things nice about being here is that we get to discuss other things, not only the passages, but some other things. And I got to tell you, every time we're together, my eyes are opened at a different level. One of the things that really has been surprising to me is just the understanding of the Hebrew language and what I assumed, and I say that word very carefully, I assumed by those who maybe knew portions of the Hebrew language, but I made a really big assumption, and that was that if you were a cantor, if you were a person who sang the Torah, that my understanding would be since you could sing it would mean you understood it, and that really wasn't the case at all. That basically, from an educational standpoint, there really is a depth of understanding that you can go to with the actual Hebrew language, and that you were mentioning to me that there are a lot of people who read the prayers, and they read the prayers in Hebrew.
Yeah. So you have to understand, in Israel, Israelis speak Hebrew and they have no problem with it. But in the diaspora, Jews outside of Israel, especially in the United States, which is the largest community of Jews outside of Israel, and until recently, in fact, there were more Jews in the U.S. than there were in Israel. So the educational method of the diaspora Jews historically has been, you've got these certain prayers that you need to recite every day and then on Shabbat. And so the focus of the educational system of the diaspora was to get Jews to be able to read Hebrew. Now, that's very misleading because, if you read a language, you assume you understand it. But actually, that wasn't even important because Hebrew is written with consonants and vowels. You can read it 100% without any problem, read every single word perfectly, but not understand it. Mm-hmm. And I would say probably most Jews in the United States who can read Hebrew perfectly cannot necessarily understand most of what they're reading. In fact, probably the average Jew who can read Hebrew perfectly in the U.S. maybe understands 10% of what he's reading. Wow. And in fact, to the point where you'll even have cantors and even rabbis of synagogues who will be able to read Hebrew perfectly and impress you with all these Hebrew terms and terminology. But when it comes to pulling a verse out of Scripture and saying, okay, translate this, they have no clue what it means.
And so you've actually, now not to go too far on this, Nehemia, but this is really kind of significant because a lot of times, and this refers to our conversation a couple weeks ago regarding sort of who you have to listen to, and by title, if a person has a certain title, if I'm a rabbi, that means I'm in a place where I can be the one that you can either be under and you can learn. And in many cases, the hard work of trying to understand what Scripture means in this language, history, and context, it doesn't just come by title. I mean, you've got to go through the work. You've got to understand.
Well, and to be sure, there's definitely rabbis and even laymen in the in the Jewish world in America who can read Scripture without a problem and understand everything they're reading. But if we're talking about the average Jew in America, even an average Orthodox Jew, it's interesting. When I was growing up, I was raised Orthodox, and I was taught to read the Torah. But when it came to the prayers, we were taught when you read these prayers, here are what they call to have kavanah, or these are the kavanot. That's the Hebrew word for intention. And it never occurred to me growing up what a strange concept that was. Really, the concept is that when I'm reciting a certain prayer, and really it's prayer by rote, I recite the same prayer 3 times a day. When you're reciting that same prayer 3 times a day every day of your life, here's what you're supposed to think about. At the time, it didn't seem strange. Now it seems so strange looking back. What do you mean, what am I supposed to think about? I should be thinking about what I'm reading. I'm reciting these words. Should I be thinking about the words? Yeah. And the answer to that is, well, the average person reciting those words doesn't know what they mean. And so you have to teach him, when you're reciting this prayer, here's what you should be thinking about, either because that's the content of the prayer, or because, this is, what you should be focusing on in your prayer thoughts. But the point is, the average Jew reading Hebrew, unfortunately, in the diaspora, throughout history, didn't understand what he was reading. There were many Jews who could read Hebrew perfectly fluently, who, will read a prayer. What was that prayer you just read? I got no clue, no idea was the answer. Well, and that's not everybody, but it's probably the vast majority.
Well, I think there's going to be an opportunity for people to be able to read and to understand, and we're going to do the best that we can to help people in that process. So let's get started.
Amen.
Right here in 2 Samuel 6, verse 1. Now David, David, the king, again gathered all the chosen men of Israel. There were 30,000. And then it says from there, now I'm thinking right away, when I see that verse, I thought he again gathered all the chosen men of Israel, 30,000. I'm thinking we're getting ready for war.
Right.
What do you think?
It's spiritual warfare. So.
When you read that, isn't that what you kind of
Absolutely,
think? Yeah. And then it says, and then David arose and went with all the people who were with him. And then there's the name of this place. And I don't know if we want to deal with this or not, but I thought it was really interesting.
We do, but I think first we have to give the background.
Okay,
so let's talk about the place.
Well, no, let me just read it. David rose and went with all the people who were with him to Baal, Judah, to bring up from there the Ark of God. And then I love this phrase, one of my favorite phrases in all of the Bible, which is called by the name. What name? It goes on to tell us the very name Yehovah Tzavaot, Yehovah of hosts, who is enthroned above the cherubim. That's what the verse says.
All right. So they're coming, and they're going to bring the ark, and they're going to take it to a different place.
Yes.
Let's give the background here. So the ark is captured by the Philistines at the Battle of Ebenezer in the time of Eli, who is the high priest, who raised up Samuel. That happens in 1 Samuel chapter 4, verse 11. Then the ark is taken to the Philistine cities of Ashdod, 1 Samuel 5:1. Then to Gat, 1 Samuel 5:8. To Ekron, 1 Samuel 5:10. Then finally a place called the Field of the Philistines in 1 Samuel 6:1. Eventually it's returned to Beit Shemesh, that's 1 Samuel 6:13, where the people were punished for looking upon it. That happens in verse 19. Now, why were they punished for looking upon it? In Numbers 4, 5-6, the Levites were commanded to cover the ark with 3 layers.
Exactly.
There was the parochet, the veil. There was this tachash, sort of leather, possibly. And then there's the blue cloth on top of all that. So there's actually 3 layers of cloths or coverings over the ark. That covers it whenever it's moved. And what this really means is nobody saw the ark. The high priest didn't see it on Yom Kippur. Why is that? Because when he would enter the Holy of Holies, he would first put the smoke inside, and he wouldn't go in until the smoke covered the ark. That's in Leviticus 16:2 and then verses 12 to 13. 1 Samuel chapter 7, verses 1 to 2, the ark is brought to a place called Kiryat Yarim, to the house of Avinadav on the hill. By Giv'ah, it says, which is the hill, and that's actually a place that we've seen.
There's a
monastery there to this day. It's in a place called Abu Ghosh today.
Yeah, the best restaurant in all of
that area. That area, right? It was kept there at the hill of Avinadav for 20 years by his son Eleazar. Kiryat Yarim was a Gibeonite city. The Gibeonites were designated as altar servants by Joshua in Joshua chapter 9, verse 27. And then in 1 Samuel 14:18, the ark is brought out to battle against the Philistines at Gibeah of Benjamin, and that's the last time we hear about the ark. 1 Samuel. So we're in 2 Samuel chapter 6. The last time we heard about the ark was 1 Samuel 14:18.
That's not the last time we hear about the ark.
Really? Where's the last time?
I mean, that's not in the Bible? Of course not.
No. From these 2 events.
Okay, got you.
Yeah. So between 1 Samuel 14:18, correct me if I'm wrong, until... I'm going to look it up right now and make sure I'm right.
Good.
If not, I'll be happy to know I was wrong. Yeah. But I believe between 1 Samuel 14:18 and 2 Samuel chapter 6, verse 1, we don't hear anything about the ark. Let's see.
You didn't see it, folks. We do hear about the ark.
We do? Okay, so tell me what we hear.
You know about Josiah. Come on.
No, I'm talking about between these 2 passages.
Yes.
So here we've got about the ark. Hold on. Let's go back because you're challenging me. So 1 Samuel 14:18. Where is this? Hold on. Looking at my little computer program here.
While he's doing that, folks, one thing that really is kind of cool.
Yeah, so 1 Samuel 14:18 mentions the ark, and the next time the ark is mentioned is in 2 Samuel 6:2.
Yeah. Okay.
So the entire rest of the book of Samuel, of 1 Samuel, and the first 5 chapters of 2 Samuel don't mention the ark.
That's right.
Meaning the last time we heard about the ark was in the time of Saul. And then we don't hear about it again until the time of David.
Gotcha. So David's going to go and get the ark. This most important thing that has in its side the Word of God. This also, it's interesting. We actually talked about this in Torah Pearls. So make sure that you check the Torah Pearls. Remember in Numbers where they'd be about to go out to war. Arise, O Yehovah, may your enemies be scattered. Yeah. I mean, that's just a powerful.
Let's talk about that. Yeah. So now in chapter 6, verse 2 of 2 Samuel, we have this amazing statement that the name of the ark was, quote, the name of Yehovah of hosts who sits on the cherubim, on the Kruvim. Can you tell us?
No, I mean, I think that alone just, I mean, when I read that, I want to ask myself, well, where does that come from? And again, the issue was when we went back to Numbers, and I think it's, what is it, Numbers chapter, what is it, Numbers?
Which one are you looking for?
Where Moses, as they're about to go out to war, and they would lift up the ark and they'd say, "Arise, O Yehovah, may your enemies be scattered."
Yeah, well, so it wasn't actually just when they went out to war; it's whenever they traveled.
Whenever they traveled, that's right.
So it's here in let's see, I've got the verse. I didn't write down where it is though. It's verses 35 to 36. I'm not sure which
35
chapter.
to 36, one of those chapters.
Right in Numbers, and it says, "Vayhi bin Ha'aron vayomer Moshe," and it came to pass when the ark would travel, and Moshe would say, Arise, Yehovah, and let your enemies be scattered, and let those who hate you flee from before you. And when it would rest, he would say,
"Come on,
Shuvah Yehovah livavot alfei Yisrael, return Yehovah of the tens of thousands of the thousands of Israel," which is another way of saying Yehovah of hosts. It's very, because hosts is a large number of people. It's really interesting. And if a pagan came to this, they would say, actually, the Israelites worship the ark. The ark is Yehovah. It doesn't represent him, and you don't hear his voice from there. It is Yehovah. A pagan reading it would hear, it's Numbers chapter 10, verses 35 to 36, it says here. So one of those chapters somewhere. So you could come to the conclusion, if you were not an Israelite and didn't know any better, that the ark is Yehovah, that they worship this object, but actually it's not Yehovah. But here's this amazing statement that helps us understand Numbers 10 here in 2 Samuel chapter 6 verse 2. It says, Aron HaElohim, the Ark of Elohim, Asher Nikra Shem, which was called in the name or by the name, Shem Yehovah Tzevaot Yoshev HaKruvim Alav, the name of Yehovah of hosts, who sits upon the Kruvim, which that's the name of the Ark. Wow. Can you...
No, I mean, that's, I don't know what else to say about it other than the fact that that's his name. I mean, that's what they call the ark.
Well, and then we have 1 Samuel chapter 6 verse 20, where this is when there's, they look upon it and there's this, plague. It says, and the men of Beit Shemesh said, who can stand before Yehovah, this holy God, and who can, so wait a minute. They make it sound like the ark is Yehovah. And there's this definitely even by some of the Israelites, there seems to be maybe a confusion because the ark is so holy, and if they mess up around it, people die. Jeremiah 3:16, we have the verse about the ark no longer being remembered. In the end times, we've talked about that. We don't talk about it again. Joshua chapter 9, verses 17 and 27. What do we have here? That has to do with the issue of. Was there anything else about the ark?
No. Well, I mean, so they say they have the ark. David is on his way to go and get the ark. He understands the significance of the ark. They place the ark of God on a new cart that they might bring it from the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill, and Uzzah and Ahio, the sons of Abinadab, were leading the new cart. Now, I'll tell you, this is where this story gets really interesting to me. It later says, in 6:4 it says, and so they brought it with the ark of God from the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. Keep talking about the hill. And here was walking ahead of the ark. And meanwhile...
What verse are you in?
I'm in 6:4. Okay, you still there?
I want to go back to the place where they took the ark from.
Okay, gotcha.
Can we talk about that? Let's see. Or where they left from. In verse 2 it says, and he rose up, and David, and you read it, and you kind of blurred,
I wanted to talk about it. Then you said we had to give the background to it.
All right, so now we've got the background. Let's talk about it.
Okay.
So, and all the people who were with him from, it says in Hebrew, Ba'alei Yehudah, the Baalei Yehuda could mean the masters of Judah, but it also means the Baals of Judah. So there's a name of a place called Baal, the Baalim, or the Baalei Yehuda. That's
and we
bizarre.
can find that where they use the name Baal. Judah, and then, isn't it my imagination? But isn't this also was called something else?
Well, so in 1 Chronicles chapter 13 verse 6, which is the parallel passage, it appears a little bit differently. It's called Baalata, and then it says to Kiryat Yearim, which is to Judah. So Baalata probably is a village, or maybe even a neighborhood, but probably a little village attached to Kiryat Yearim. Joshua 15 verse 9 mentions Baalah, which is Kiryat Yearim. And then in Joshua 15:60 and 18:14, it says Kiryat Baal, which in Kiryat, by the way, means city. So the city of Baal, which is Kiryat Yearim. So 4 times we have this reference to some kind of a city called Baal or Baalata or Baalei Yehuda or Kiryat Baal. And these apparently all refer to the same city, which is, or a village, which is associated with Kiryat Yearim. Now, Kiryat Yearim itself is interesting because it's one of the Gibeonite cities. So we have in Joshua chapter 9, verses 17 to 27, it says, "And the children of Israel traveled, and they came to their cities on the 3rd day, and their cities were Gibeon and Kephirah and Be'erot and Kiryat Yearim." So there's 4 Gibeonite cities. And we're not going to, remember the story of the Gibeonites. They didn't want to be destroyed by the Israelites. They pretended they're from far away, made a covenant. Then they were stuck.
Covenant stood.
That covenant stood. And then it says, Joshua placed them on that day as cutters of wood and drawers of water for the congregation, and for the altar of Yehovah until this day, to the place where he will choose. So you ask this question, wait a minute, the ark is at the house of Avi-Nadav, and then we're finding out that there's this place, Kiryat Yearim, which is a Gibeonite city. What is the ark doing at the Gibeonite city? And that's because the Gibeonites were appointed by Joshua to have this service for the tabernacle and for the temple. Yes. So they were appropriate to be doing that. And it's really interesting, these Gibeonites, because they're not by race Israelites. They're not descended from Jacob. They're not really, there's this, they're basically like kind of a separate people who have, kind of been attached to Israel. And then Jeremiah 26:20, we have a really interesting reference. Let me just pull that up. Jeremiah 26:20. It says, "And there was also a man who prophesied in the name of Yehovah, Uriyahu the son of Shemayahu, from Kiryat Yearim. And he prophesied over this city and over this land according to all the words of Jeremiah." So we have here a prophet whose name he's like a very obscure prophet, Uriyahu the son of Shemayahu, and he is a Gibeonite. And as far as I know, this is the only Gentile prophet in the entire Tanakh who's a legitimate prophet. Or the non-Israelite prophet, because we do have obviously Balaam, but Balaam turns out to be a bad seed. This guy's a legitimate prophet. He's and how many legitimate? We have lots of Israelites who are bad prophets. 400 or whatever the number is in 1 Kings 22. Here we have a legitimate Gibeonite prophet. So that just tells us how relevant and how significant the Gibeonites are. Nehemiah chapter 7 verse 29 mentions people of 3 of the Gibeonite cities as returning to the land of Israel with Zerubbabel, which is really interesting. So it's not that these Gibeonites just disappear. They continue to be part of the people of the Jews who returned.
Isn't it interesting, though, Nehemia, say his name again?
Zerubbabel?
No, the Gibeonite, the prophet.
Oh, Uriyahu ben Shemayahu.
Uriyahu. So what does Uriyahu mean?
Uriyahu, I guess, comes from the word or, which is light. Yehovah is my light, or possibly Yehovah is my furnace. Son of Shemayahu, which means listen, hear Yehovah.
Who hears. It's so funny when I think about his name and I think about what it would mean. We say we call him a Gentile, a Gentile prophet, but yet he's got this name.
I should say non-Israelite.
Non-Israelite.
That's more accurate.
Yeah. Okay.
Isn't that interesting though?
Yeah.
So, and that is interesting because there is a discussion in Jewish sources about, well, if somebody converts to Judaism, if they join the people of Israel, can they be a prophet? And here we see the answer is clearly yes.
Wow. That
there are no two, there's no second-class citizens in Israel. If you're part of the people of Israel, you're part of the people of Israel.
Amen.
Anyway, the 3 cities mentioned in Nehemiah 7:29 are Kiryat Yearim, Kephirah, and Be'erot. And it's clear by the time of Nehemiah the Gibeonites are assimilated as Israelites. There's really no distinction between them. It doesn't call them Gibeonites in Nehemiah 7:29. It just says where they're from. So, Anyway, yeah, so let's talk about the ark coming from the Gibeonite city.
Okay, so we gave some background on that. And I thought you were going to say something. I'm going to wait till later. I'm not going to tell you, otherwise I'll wait till we're done and say, why didn't you bring this up? And you say, why didn't you brought that up in the verse?
Why don't you bring it up?
I'm just kidding you. All right, so it says, and they placed the Ark of God on a new cart.
What verse are you in, 3?
3.
Okay.
All right, and they placed it, and they brought it from the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. And Uzzah and Ahio, the sons of Abinadab, were leading the new cart. So they brought it with the Ark of God from the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. Again, we're talking about the hill. And I just want to say something.
This is the hill in Kiryat Yarim, where the monastery is today.
Which is amazing because having been there, now I've been there several times. And when you say the hill, when you're in that area, you know where the hill is.
Oh, yeah.
There's only one place where the hill is. And and again, it's another example where geography is so amazing to actually see. Now, when you say the hill here, you're like, well, it's just a hill. Yeah, which hill? But there it says the hill. And in that place, you actually see exactly where that is.
Yeah.
But it said David and all the house of Israel were celebrating before Yehovah. And there's another example. They're celebrating before Yehovah with all kinds of instruments, wood, lyre, harp, tambourines, etc. But when they came to the threshing floor of Nachon, Uzzah reached out toward the Ark of God and took hold of it, for the oxen nearly upset it. Now,
the ark. What?
Yeah,
they nearly upset it.
Yeah, nearly upset it.
Can we finish reading the story, and then we'll go back and talk about nearly upset it?
Yep. And the anger of Yehovah burned against Uzzah, and God struck him down there for his irreverence, and he died there by the Ark of God. And this is just before David got angry. All right, go ahead.
Oh, read one more verse.
Okay, David became angry because of Yehovah's outburst against Uzzah, and that place is called Peretz Uzzah to this day.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So first of all, Peretz Uzzah, the word Peretz means outburst or to burst forth. Mm-hmm. So in Hebrew, it's a play on words. It says Paratz Yehovah Peretz Uzzah. He said Yehovah is Paratz. He burst forth, and therefore it's called Peretz Uzzah. Mm-hmm. We've had another discussion once about Baal Pratzim in my book Shattered Conspiracy of Silence. Anyway, it's the same word, and one of the ancestors of David is a man named Peretz because he came out. This is interesting. So what did you have there at the end of verse 6?
So it says, but when they came to the threshing floor of Nachon, Uzzah reached out toward the Ark of God and took hold of it, for the oxen nearly upset it.
What does that even mean? What translation is that?
That's an NASB.
Okay, so if you read that in the NASB and you didn't know the Hebrew, would you know what that meant?
Well, if I just read it the way it is there, it says, and they took hold of it, for the oxen nearly upset it, meaning the oxen
what does that mean?
Upset the cart. The cart.
Oh, so like destabilized.
Yeah.
Okay, so JPS has for the oxen had stumbled. King James has for the oxen shook it. NIV has because the oxen stumbled. So what's the real word there? And it's really, do you know what the word is in Hebrew?
I can't even see where we're at.
The word is shamtu, and that's the word Shemitah. Everyone's talking this year in 2015 about the Shemitah, which is the 7th year sabbatical year. And the word Shemitah literally means to let something go. And it talks about, not plowing the fields, which you're letting the fields go. And also in Deuteronomy 15:2, you can see this very clearly. It says, every creditor that lendeth aught unto his neighbor shall release it. And the word for release it is shamat. And you could also translate it as to throw something down. The literal translation in Hebrew is shamot, throw down or let go every master of a loan of his hands that he lends to his fellow. So he's got this loan in his hand. He's holding the debt in his hand, the certificate of debt. He's saying, let it go. And I apologize, Keith, but when I hear this, every time now I hear about Shemitah and I think about this, I think of the Disney song, Let It Go.
No.
Let it
Disney,
go.
Folks,
and the reason I think about that is I actually taught that to my Chinese students in China, and there are 2 translations in Chinese. One is Sui Taba, which means let it be, and the other, which is more popular, is Feng Kai Shou, which literally means open the hand. And that's what Shemitah means. It means open the hand and let it go.
Okay.
So what happened here is the oxen were carrying this thing, and they almost let it go. They almost dropped it.
They almost dropped it.
Yeah, they almost, yeah.
Okay. Now, I would like to tell you something so really interesting. So one of the things that I did, and you actually were a part of it. You weren't as excited about it as I wanted you to, but eventually you moved into the mode, which was really kind of exciting. And that was where I told you that I wanted to go on a journey to find like the best way I could say it's like in the footsteps of the Ark, from where we know of it crossing the Jordan until we get to those five cities, the Philistine cities. And Nehemia, I just want to bring this up because you brought something up earlier about how the Ark sometimes being seen as a god, and it's interesting. The Philistines go so far as to say it. When the Ark came into the camp, they said their God came into the camp. I think it was something like that. Mm-hmm. So that the Philistines actually saw it as the Ark, meaning the Ark as if they took it to talk about it as if it was God. But what was so interesting about this is that the journey of the Ark going into that place, that God allowed for two things happening. One, that the Ark itself was taken. Mm-hmm. Like it was actually taken,
captured,
but it was being captured. But then with that capturing came judgment. Mm-hmm. It's like, I don't know. For me, I was just...
So the Philistines thought they had power over the Ark.
Exactly.
And the truth is that the Ark had power over them.
You really don't want to play with God.
You don't want to mess with God.
You don't want to mess with God.
And they didn't, if they'd only seen the movie Indiana Jones with the Ark,
exactly,
where the faces are melted off, it's, but that's obviously exaggerated in the movie, but it's not far from the truth.
But the reason I'm bringing that up, and then again, we also found the situation, as you talked about, Beit Shemesh, where the men of Beit Shemesh, they saw the Ark. What does it say? They opened. Did it say they opened it, or did it say they just looked at it? How does it say that?
They looked upon it.
They looked upon it?
Not mistaken.
Okay.
But I could be. People look it up and post in the comments and say, Nehemia was wrong. Keith was right.
Yeah. But the point is that so we have David's history and understanding, all these things that are going on. And then this act takes place. The anger of Yehovah burns against Uzzah. Mm-hmm. And God struck him down there, and it says for his irreverence.
What verse are you reading?
I'm reading in 6:7.
Okay.
So I want to ask you a question. What in the text, in other words, what does the text say that shows irreverence? That he reached out?
So first of all, I want to look at the other translations and see what they say.
Yep.
Because I'm curious. Yours has irreverence. This is 2 Samuel chapter 6, verse 7. And the word in Hebrew is shal. Mm-hmm. So literally it says, al hashal, because of the shal. Mm-hmm. King James has, and God smote him there for his error. Okay, he was in error. JPS has, God struck him down on the spot for his indiscretion. So we have indiscretion, error. NIV has of his irreverent act. And which ones did you read? NRSV has struck him because he reached out. Let's see. So NRSV doesn't actually translate the word; it skips it. and here's the interesting thing: it says because of the shal. Shal is what we call a hapax legomenon. It's a unique word that only appears here once in the entire Tanakh. And really, it's one of these words that we have to say the meaning is uncertain.
It's uncertain. But something happened.
And here's an interesting thing. People will always talk about. I'll hear many people talk about the Septuagint. How we've got to go by the Septuagint, the ancient Greek translation of the Bible. Even though the original Septuagint was only the 5 books of Moses, and the prophets were translated much later by unknown people. But and this is in Samuel, which is considered part of the prophets in the Hebrew. So the Septuagint leaves out this word because it doesn't know how to translate it. And the NRSV is basing itself on the Septuagint, saying, "Look, I don't know what this is. I'm just going to ignore it." Some of the modern scholars suggest that this is a scribal error, meaning they don't know what to do with it, so they just ignore it. In Aramaic, the word shali means error, and so those who are translating it as error, they're getting it from the Aramaic. Aramaic is a sister language of Hebrew, another Semitic language, and so that's not. There's nothing wrong with that. Meaning, it may not be correct, but it's a legitimate approach to say if we don't know what the word is in Hebrew, let's look into other Semitic languages and see if they can shed light. In Akkadian, the word shulu means to treat disdainfully, and what you can see if you look at the different translations, some of them are ignoring it, like the Septuagint. Some of them are basing it on the Aramaic, and some are basing it on the Akkadian. And the bottom line from all this is we just don't know.
And I got to tell you something and this is something that I think is so cool about just the study. Nehemia, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 words in the verse of 2 Samuel 6:7. And by you going through word by word, you find this one pearl. Now, I consider this a pearl. I really do consider this a pearl. Okay. Because here's an example where by looking at other translations, looking at the English translations, looking at the Hebrew, you find that there's this word here. Yeah. And the truth of the matter is, after it's all said and done, we don't know exactly what the word means. But we do know, because of that word, this thing happened.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, whatever it was,
because of his shawl,
whatever shawl was,
right.
whatever shawl was, Yehovah through his eyes saw Uzzah do this thing. And again, we could make conjecture. Maybe he got mad and started cussing and
it actually could be because he took his shoe off, because the word shal as a verb means to take off your shoe.
Maybe maybe I could
because
do a whole
of the removal of the shoe.
I could do a whole teaching on this. This is holy ground. Maybe he didn't take his shoes off. You know what I'm saying?
It's possible.
We don't know what it is, but I think what's exciting, and I want to slow down and just say this.
Yeah.
What's exciting is again, people, there are ways that you can actually learn this where they could at least find out what each of the words are.
Yeah.
And find out what the issue is. Not always knowing the answer, but knowing what the questions are, to me, in many cases becomes the biggest blessing. So in this situation, we just know that Uzzah is going along with this whole process, and he does something that causes Yehovah to strike him down, and David didn't like it. When that happened,
what's the like? Of course he didn't. Well,
no, I'm saying whatever it was, that David's like, look, this is not acceptable. So David was, and it says, here's what it says in 6:9, and you can please see if there's a difference here. In the NASB, it says, so David was, and it uses the word afraid. David was afraid of Yehovah that day, and he said, how can the Ark of Yehovah come to me? So whatever it is that happened, I mean, we know what happened physically. What happened is that Uzzah died. But, I mean, for David, he's like, well, look, there's a direct relation between whatever he did, Shaul, and the fact that he died. So David says, all right.
Oh, what he did is clear. He stuck out his hand.
Okay.
And that was a shawl. Why that was a shawl, I don't know.
Right.
Was it an error? Was it an indiscretion? Whatever. Or some other unknown thing. He clearly stuck out his hand and he died as a result of it. And that's scary. David's right. Mm-hmm. David's thinking, "Oh man, I committed adultery, and I've done all these things, and God's had mercy on me. And now all of a sudden we're dealing with this ark where you just do some minor little thing like this, and God strikes you down with, what? He's done some major things and survived it. Yeah. He's thinking, I'm not ready. I can't have this. Is scary. I can't have this. This ark. This is a scary thing. The ark." So what, and when it says David feared, literally it says in Vayirad David, David feared Yehovah on that day. He was afraid.
Exactly.
Rightly so. By the way, and we won't go into this, but I just want to invite people who to go to 1 Chronicles 13:2 and see that for this idea of Peretz Uzzah, the bursting forth upon Uzzah. There's another pun there, and if you look in the Hebrew, you'll see that word Peretz with a slightly different meaning. It's kind of like a more intricate pun. That's kind of a bonus for those who are able to read it.
Yeah, awesome.
Pretty cool. Yeah, let's go on.
All right. So anyway, so David gets this, and he says, "Look, I'm not gonna bring this back to me to Jerusalem." So he took it aside to the house of Obed Edom, and then it says Obed Edom the Gittite. Now, is this really the Gittite, like that big guy who fought David?
So you're referring to Goliath, the Gittite.
You think it's the same Gittite?
It's a different Gittite, but he's from the same place.
You think it's the absolute same?
Absolutely.
So you think there's...
Now we should say there were not a lot of places called Gat.
Okay.
A Gittite is somebody from Gat.
Yeah.
There's at least 3 places. There's the Philistine Gat, there's Gat Limon, and there's Gat HaChefer. For example, Jonah ben Amittai, or the prophet Jonah, he was from a place called Gat HaChefer. Gat just means wine press. So wherever there was a wine press or an important wine press, the city could potentially be called Gat.
So there
were villages called Gat.
Yeah.
But he is the house of Obed Edom the Gittite. David, in particular, was surrounded in his life by a lot of Gittites who were from Gat, who were from the Philistine Gat. And that's because during David's time as a refugee, when he was being chased by Saul, we're told that he, he went to Achish, who was the king of Gat.
Yes,
he was hiding out with the Gittites in Philistia, and he was.
You know why they brought David in as a Gittite? Why they let him come to that place?
Why?
You have any idea?
I mean, I assume because he was an enemy of Saul, and your enemy's enemy is your friend.
No, because he beat Goliath. He was a hero for them. He was a champion.
I think
it's like in football terms where you have this great guy who plays for one team, and next thing you know, he's available. He's a free agent, so you bring him on your team. He beats you every year.
Well, but when push came to shove, they said, we don't trust this David.
Exactly.
Maybe we'll be against Saul, and he'll come out to war against us.
Exactly.
And they remembered that, wait a minute, this is the guy who killed our hero.
Exactly.
And so they really were untrusting of David. It's really, I want to look at some of these Gittites that were around David. Can we do that real quick?
Yes.
Let's see. There's also
amongst the 30. Were there even a couple amongst the 3 or no?
The 30 and the 3. I can't tell you I remember. No,
I love when they talk about the 30
not,
and the 3.
Apparently.
Okay.
Okay. So that's in 2 Samuel chapter 21. Or no, yeah, something like that. Anyway, let's see, where are we? Now that you've distracted me. All right. So 2 Samuel chapter 15 is a really interesting passage. It's where David is fleeing from Avshalom or Absalom. In verse 17 it says, and the king went out and all the people at his feet, literally it says, and they stood outside far away, and all of his servants were passing before him, and it says, and all the Creti and all the Pleti. And the Creti apparently were Cretans from Crete. Or actually, they may have been Philistines whose ancestors came from Crete. And the Pleti were also some sort of Philistine. These were bands of soldiers who were loyal to David. And they were probably what we would call today foreign mercenaries. In other words, they joined David during his time as an outlaw, and literally an outlaw. He was outside the law. Saul was the law, and David was his enemy. So he had these band of merry men that surrounded him. And some of them were Philistines. And it says all the Gittites, 600 men, who came with him from Gath. So we've got these Philistines, 3 bands of Philistines: the Gittites and the Cretans and the Pletans. I don't know what Pletans are. And then it talks in verse 19, the very next verse. And the king said to Ittai the Gittite. Now, who's Ittai the Gittite? He's the king's advisor. He's his right hand man.
Yes.
He becomes a general, or he is a general. And you may think, well, of course. Let's stop before we read verse 2 Samuel 15:19. Tell me what the controversy was about Obed Edom the Gittite. That you were called to task for this.
Called to task for this because I was saying that Obed Edom. I said he was the Gittite that got it right. He invited the name to his house.
Who got it right?
He got it right.
So Goliath was the Gittite who got it wrong.
He got it wrong. He didn't want anything to do with the God of Israel.
He actually cursed the God of Israel.
He cursed the God of Israel. And what people said was, no, Obed Edom was not could not have been
a Philistine.
A Philistine.
He had to be an Israelite.
He had to be an Israelite
because no Gittite would have anything to do
with the Ark of God. Why would David bring?
Couldn't be right.
Yeah.
Even though this is near Gibeon or somewhere around Gibeon,
right? And it was a big deal. It was a big problem.
Oh yeah, this was an international controversy.
Yeah.
So here we're reading about Ittai the Gittite, and if we base it on the same ideas, what your people are talking about, where you were brought to task and say, wait, he's a Gittite, he's got to be an Israelite. But it goes on, and the king says, why should you go also with us? Go and dwell with the king, meaning with Absalom. It says, Ki nochriata, for you're a foreigner, you're a Gentile. That's the word that means Gentile. And it says also, you are an exile from your place. Meaning, this isn't even your fight. What are you doing here? Well, you're going to come with me fleeing from Absalom? You're a foreigner. You're whoever pays your salary, you'll be loyal to.
Exactly.
Absalom will be fine with you. You don't have to come with us. You're not even an Israelite. This isn't your fight. And Ittai refuses, and he does go with David. But isn't that interesting? And then in verse 21 it says, and Ittai answered the king, and he said, Chai Yehovah v'chei Adoni HaMelech. As Yehovah lived, by the life of Yehovah and by the life of my Lord the king.
And give that reference again.
That's 2 Samuel 15:21.
Yep.
So here, this Gittite, who's a Gentile, he's explicitly stated to be a Gentile. He's swearing by the name of Yehovah, saying, "No, I'm going wherever you're going. I'm not. I swear by the life of Yehovah and by your life, the king."
And the reason why this is really interesting to me is that we have examples, and we could do a study on this. Examples of people who came and joined themselves with Israel, who were not quote unquote Israelites in blood, but ended up joining them and becoming significant. And again, when we have the situation with Obed Edom, what you said that was really interesting was the job that Joshua had given to those people,
to the Gibeonites.
To the Gibeonites.
Yeah.
And including, you're thinking they're going to cut wood and water, and then it adds...
For the altar.
For the altar.
Right. They're temple servants. That's the term, temple servants.
Amazing.
And we have a picture of a temple servant with Samuel.
Yeah.
Samuel is this little boy, and he says, okay, you've been dedicated to Yehovah. Here, go work at the temple. And they're like, wait a minute. Is Samuel even a Levite? He's definitely not a Kohen. He's definitely not a priest. What's he doing in there? Well, he's been given over to the temple.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't have a problem with Obed Edom being a Gentile, meaning a non-Israelite, and having to deal with the Ark. And I think this is the point. David's thinking, I can't have any more of my people die. This is really bad. Uzzah was this holy guy, and he died. Let's just, let's not deal with this. And he puts it in the house of Obed Edom the Gittite. And let's read on.
Well, and again, he puts it in his household, and after 3 months, he finds out Yehovah has blessed the house of Obed Edom and all that belongs to him on account. And it then says why. It does. The verse literally says David finds out that Obed-Edom has got a blessing in his house, and the reason is the Ark of God. Mm-hmm. And David is not a dummy. He's sitting and thinking, now wait a minute. I turn aside. I give the ark to Obed-Edom, and I find out for 3 months that everything has been blessed. And they say the reason is because of the ark. So he has second thoughts. Maybe I better go get it anyway.
Right.
That's exactly what he did. So he goes, and it says.
So basically, you're saying we've got this Gentile, Obed-Edom Haggiti, the Gittite, and David's jealous that he's got the ark, which is called by the name Yehovah. And you have a great teaching on this.
Yes,
I gotta get honestly, from my perspective, this is one of your best teachings. Is this in the Open Door series?
It's in the Open Door series.
Yeah,
okay. It's actually early.
But I actually first heard you teach this at where was that? At the church in Smithfield. Mm-hmm. And it was really cool because there was this
because the ark was there.
There was an ark. There was this model of the ark, like a replica of the ark. And you were preaching on this, and it was a really powerful thing. And you made a really good point. The ark is called by the name of Yehovah. And we've got the situation where the Israelite looks at that thing, the ark, and the name that it represents, and he's terrified of it. Mm-hmm. And isn't that a picture? We talked about yesterday, prophecy for yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Today, the reality for the average Jew is they're terrified of that name Yehovah. Mm. It's frightening to them. It's too holy. We can't pronounce it. And now we've got Jews who are looking and saying, "What? Wait a minute. Why are all these Gentiles speaking the name?" And some of them are starting to get jealous.
Do you think that's happening?
I do think it's happening.
No, you really think that's happening?
I do.
Because what's so interesting about what you're saying is...
And I think my people need to go up like David and take the name back.
We're in Jerusalem.
Look,
we're in Jerusalem right now.
We're getting the blessing. We need to be part. We need a piece of that.
We're in Jerusalem.
That blessing of the name of Yehovah.
We're 10 minutes away for this whole thing happening. And you're saying you think it's possible that maybe there's something about the whole idea of David looking over and saying, wait a minute. Yehovah seems to be blessing that Obed-Edom, the Gittite. the
ark, which is called by the name, because of the ark, which is called by the name. So we should not be afraid of Yehovah.
Wouldn't it be amazing if Jewish people would decide to take the name back?
I think we would be so blessed. Yeah. I think it would bless the whole world.
Yeah, I think you're 100%
certainly the people
right.
of Israel.
I tell you what, and you've come a long way. And let me just stop. I'm probably getting a little trouble for this. You'll probably beat me up after this. But look, we're recording two or three of these in one day.
Yeah.
But Nehemia, just regarding this, because we're talking about the name, and we're going to stay within the time frame here. But I think this is really interesting because you and I we went through a really difficult process of trying to determine how to bring the information to the average person, and we were concerned. You do get concerned. Is someone going to be like Uzzah and be irreverent with the name of God and not treat it in the way that it should be treated? So the other balance of that is, well, let's just stay away from it completely. So the rabbis say, let's just stay away from it completely. Now
let's exile it to the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite.
Let me just say this: in the first few years, I fought you because you'd be so conservative, and you'd say, well, maybe
diplomatic.
It's this. Is that what you call it, Nehemia?
I think I'm a very diplomatic person by
Why
nature.
do you go from this diplomacy to writing this study? I'm going to bring it up again, which now by far is probably the most important study that Nehemia has ever done. Other than the name, this is number 2 regarding the issue of Jupiter and the way that you did it with Yahweh. So you said something in the middle of this study about people potentially maybe not understanding, clearly not understanding what they're doing, but what the root of it would be, which is really a explosive issue.
Right.
I mean, and then on the other end of it, you're sharing with people, here's what we see in the Hebrew manuscripts regarding the name. What happened to you? What's this?
I still, look, what I don't want to do, and I still think I consider myself to be extremely diplomatic, and if people want to criticize me for that, I'm fine. If people actually listen to the study, what I don't want to do is hit people over the head with the Torah scroll.
Right.
I don't want to hit them over the head with the name of Yehovah. I don't want to be the word police. What I want to do is empower people with information. And that's what I did in that study. I said, here are the sources. Let's look at the sources and understand the sources. Then you work it out for yourself in fear and trembling with prayer and study. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying, this is now the doctrine, and anyone who doesn't say it is a pagan heathen who should be cast. I'm not saying that at all.
Right.
I'm saying, look, this is what the sources are.
It was a pretty compelling title, though. Catchy. I mean, are you kidding me?
I mean, look, and what I say in the study is, look, it's not that I'm saying it. This is what the people who
don't know, what's the title called, Nehemia?
Have you been praying to Jupiter?
Diplomatic.
But that's really the question.
But I'm glad that you did.
And the point for those who haven't listened to the study is that the people who cooked up this name Jupiter in the 1800s, particularly the scholar named Gesenius, he actually says, well, how do we know it's Yahweh? because the Latin pronunciation of Jupiter is Yahweh, and that can't be a coincidence to him. To him, that must be the source of the Hebrew name. We're having a common source from Egypt. And this is the guy who is the source for, somebody said to me, he said, well, you should give more credit to the Encyclopedia Judaica. I'm sure they looked up their sources. I looked up their sources, and this is their source. A guy who's telling me that it's Yahweh because the Latins say Yahweh, which is Jupiter. Sorry, I can't accept that. And so it's not that I'm saying it. This is what it says. These are the guys who are saying it. I looked in the source where Yahweh came from. That's where it comes from.
What's so amazing to me,
one of the places it comes
is that you have done something really radical. You haven't just to let the Gentile go and run with the name. You have said, look, I want to be able to understand it, and I want to share it. It's prophetic. It's biblical. His name is going to be known. People are going to know his name. And I just think this story is such an amazing story because David basically said, look, I'm afraid of it. Let me give it to Obed-Edom the Gittite. Obed received it, got blessed. David said, okay, I better go back and get it. And we hope that that's the story, that people do say, look, let's have what it is that's been given to us. This is the Ark of God, where he's got his written word, where he speaks his word. I mean, it's an amazing thing. Now, I won't go into great depth about this, but there is a phenomenal study, which eventually we're going to share regarding where this place is called, where Obed-Edom's house is, and also where this took place for Uzzah. And it really is something that goes into great depth. And I have to give credit to my friend Yehuda Glick, who did an entire study on this, which really, really, really opened my eyes to some geographical issues. So eventually I'd like to be able to share that. I'd love for you to see it. But I want to thank you, Nehemia, for going with me. Just tell them about one thing. We went to the 5 cities of God. We went where the Ark went.
Well, the 5 cities of the Philistines.
The Philistines. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we actually didn't go to Gaza.
We were close.
We saw Gaza, and we went to the 4 cities of the Philistines.
We went to 4 cities of the Philistines. So anyway, the story...
And we saw the 5th one.
is that David now is going to bring it back, and there's a really interesting thing here. It talks about what happened when they decided to bring the Ark back. It says, with the bearers of the Ark of Yehovah had gone 6 paces, they sacrificed an ox and a fatling, is what it says here. Mm-hmm. So literally, they went 6 steps. David said, we're going to be sure to be holy before this. Like, they took 6 steps. They had the...
do you have a spiritual teaching about why it was 6, 6, and 6? Uh-oh. No, let's move on.
So David and all the house of Israel were bringing up the Ark of Yehovah with shouting and the sound of the trumpet. One interesting fact I'd just like to bring up. I do think it's really interesting that David now has it where the priests are carrying the Ark. Before that, the Ark was on a cart. Where does it ever say anything about an Ark being on a cart? In other words, when transferring the Ark, there were actually specific rules.
There were poles.
Yeah, there were poles.
So they were carrying the poles.
Exactly. But I'm saying, so now when he does decide to bring it back, he must have asked the question, well, how is the Ark supposed to be how was it travel? How did it travel? And so, and that's what actually...
So you're saying basically David said, okay, we had this tradition... And remember,
I'm not saying for sure, but I mean...
one place we know the Ark was on the cart is when it came back from the Philistines.
Yep,
the Philistines stuck it on a cart.
Yep.
And now David's saying, maybe we need to get biblical here.
Exactly.
Let's get biblical.
Let's get biblical.
Yeah, let's go back to what it says in the Torah.
That's a great title. Let's try to do a show. Let's get biblical.
I think we should do that. We should do a program called Let's Get Biblical.
That's what David did.
Yeah. Anyway... So can we read, and we're not going to read the whole thing here because we're running out of time, Can we read verse 18?
Yes, we have to.
And just mention, can you read it?
Yes, and verse 18, further he when David had finished offering the burnt offering and the peace offering, he blessed the people in the name Yehovah Tzabaot.
Now, he didn't actually say the name Yehovah. He said, in the name of Adonai.
No. He blessed him in the name.
But in your Hebrew, does it say Adonai? Or
No.
Yehovah?
It says Yehovah.
Oh, wow.
Yep, he blessed them in the name.
All right. But I thought the name was a secret that they never heard.
No. David understood. He brought the name back. He
didn't whisper the blessing under his breath?
No, absolutely.
Can we talk about the dancing?
Yes.
Okay. So, can you read verse 20?
Yes. And so, but when David returned to bless his household, Michal, the daughter of Saul, came out to meet David and said, how the king of Israel has distinguished himself today. He uncovered himself today in the eyes of his servants' maids, as one of the foolish ones shamelessly uncovers himself. So David...
That's because he was dancing naked.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he had... Well,
he probably took his shirt off and...
I mean, he was...
Look, we say in Yiddish, how I was raised, he was getting real... He was very lebedik. He was, moved by his heart. Mm-hmm. And Michal, who is the daughter of a king, Now remember, her father was a shepherd. He grew up, but but she doesn't remember that she grew up as a queen. That's or a princess. That's all she knows. And then she married a king, and in her eyes, the king is too distinguished. And look, David was half dressed. If he were up there in Syria with ISIS, they'd have flogged him, and he would definitely be kicked out of the Baptist church for what he was doing. Am I right?
No question.
And there's plenty of synagogues he would be kicked out of, no question. But here he was before the ark, and he was being moved by his heart to dance before Yehovah.
And I have to be honest. It's hard for me not to think about David's earlier experience with Uzzah. He's seeing what happens. It says he's afraid of Yehovah. The things gets changed. He gets biblical. He has people sacrificing. He has the priest carrying the ark, and he's dancing before Yehovah. Clearly, it's like he's at a place of all out commitment. Here it is. I don't care what anyone thinks. I can be the king, but before him, who am I? He's just dancing and worshiping before Yehovah. So
2 Samuel chapter 7 has the parallel. Please go read it. In 2 Chronicles chapter 17 verses 1 to 15, I want to encourage people to go read both passages side by side and compare them. You'll learn a lot of interesting things.
It is really amazing. Now the second part of it, Nehemia, we've talked about this actually before regarding what happened. So where are we at right now?
I'm jumping ahead because we're not on time. 2 Samuel chapter 7 verse 3 I want to talk about.
Got you.
So we have the phrase there, and Natan said to the king, Nathan, Natan the prophet, all that is in your heart, go do, ki Yehovah imach, for Yehovah is with you. And this is a phrase, a concept that we have repeatedly throughout the Tanakh. I'm sure we've talked about this, but Yehovah being with someone, is this repeated, this is a central concept. He actually said, I will be with you to Moses. Let me bring you that one. That's a common phrase. For example, actually, even in Genesis 26:3, Yehovah says to Abraham, he says, Ehyeh imcha, I will be with you. I think that's to Abraham. And then in, let's skip ahead. There's a bunch of places. I will be with you is this phrase that appears over and over. Exodus 3:12, when Yehovah reveals himself to Moses at the burning bush, he says, Ehyeh imach, I will be with you. And then he says, I will be with your mouth. And here's this idea of Yehovah being with somebody, and that actually goes back to the core of what Yehovah's name is. He's Hayah Hoveh Hieh, he who was, he who is, and he who is to come, he who will be. And it's not just that he exists, which he does, but he is the one who is going to be with us.
Amen.
He is, and he's with us.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah.
So then, and again, what was it that was in his mind? David was dealing with the issue of wanting, as he's brought the ark there, and now he wants to deal with the issue of building a house, as we already talked about,
right.
A house for the name, a house
right.
for Yehovah, a house for the ark, a house for the things. And so, and it says here, when he says, go ahead and do that, I will be with you. But in the same night, the word of Yehovah came unto Nathan. Go and say to my servant David, thus says Yehovah, are you the one who should build, and I like this phrase, it says, are you the one who should build me a house to dwell in?
I'm building your house. You don't need to build my house.
Exactly. But interesting, he says, me a house to dwell in. And again, and we see this phrase over and over again. What is the house being built for? A house for the name being built. Build the house. Shall I build the house? Et cetera. So again, speaking of his name. For I have not dwelt in a house since the day I brought up the sons of Israel from Egypt, even to this day. And then here's where it says, now this is Yehovah speaking, Nehemia, and I really, really love this phrase. But I have been moving about. I've been moving about. And what is he talking about? I've been moving about in a tent, even in it says, even in a mishkan, even in a tabernacle. So, you have the perspective of the people, you have the perspective of what we're seeing happening, and then you have the words of Yehovah saying, look, yes, in my presence has been moving about. And what was the representation of his presence? What was the representation of his presence? Where was the ark?
I want to be careful about the word presence, because that could mean different things to different people.
Okay.
But definitely the ark was the place where Moses would hear the voice of Yehovah, and it was a holy object.
Yes.
And it contained the, and we could see how holy it is. The guy stretches out his hand to touch it, and he gets stricken down.
And what I think is interesting, when I think about the ark, I actually think about it from the perspective of the written word and the spoken word. The written word on the inside, the spoken word on the outside. Basically, and then, of course, it being called by his name.
By the name Yehovah.
Yeah, so it just really is pretty amazing. He's talked about, but how have you not, it says here, where I have gone with all the sons of Israel, did I speak a word with one of the tribes of Israel, which I commanded to shepherd my people Israel, saying, why have you not built me a house of cedar? Now, therefore, 7:8. Can I continue?
Yeah, I'm waiting.
You shall say to my servant David, good. Thus says Yehovah of hosts, it took you from pasture, from following sheep. He's reminding David where he came from and what he did for him. He says, I'm going to make you into a great name. This is all preparing for what it is, the promise that comes to David in 2 Samuel chapter 7. Appointing a place for my people Israel, and will plant them that they may live in their own place and not be disturbed again, may it be. Nor will the wicked afflict them anymore as formerly. Even from that day I commanded judges to be over my people Israel, and I will give you rest from all your enemies. The Yehovah also declares to you, the Lord will make a house for you. Now we're talking about the promise to David. I mean, in other words, we're talking about him wanting to make a house for him, and you just said it. Now I'm talking about making a house for you. And so, and it says in verse 12, I'm getting to your verse, when your days are complete and you lie down with your fathers, and we've done prophet plural sections on this, what happened with David and what happened regarding the promise to Solomon. I will raise up your descendant after you who will come forth from you, and I will establish his kingdom. This is, again, this messianic promise of what's going to happen, that David's going to be established, his line's going to be established. I will be a father to him, and he will be a son to me.
Ooh, can we talk about that?
We can say that. Let's stop and ask and see what that says. Let's read it. Nehemia, and I don't know if you'd be willing to.
And we've talked about this before. I think, this idea, but I love this concept. We have this idea. Yehovah says, "I will be for him a son," meaning your descendant, your descendant, and he will be for me. I will be for him a father, and he will be for me a son. And then the parallel 1 Chronicles chapter 17 verse 13, he says the same thing. I'll be for him a father, and he will be for me a son. And it says, "V'chasti lo asir me'imo," in my grace or my righteousness, I will not remove from him. I won't take away from him. As kasher asioti me'asher haya lefanecha, as I took it away from he who was before you, meaning Saul, meaning your son. I'm going to choose, that line forever. The one who I choose is my son. And then we have 1 Chronicles 28:6. Let's see. It says, "Vayomer li Shlomo bincha hu yivne veiti v'chatzorota." Here, David is saying that God said to him, "Your son Solomon, he will build my house and my courtyards, for I have chosen him for me as a son, and I will be for him a father." That's 1 Chronicles 28:6. So we've got these three witnesses, three passages that speak about the King of Israel, the anointed, the Messiah, the one from the line of David, who comes after David, in this case Solomon, is God's chosen son. And that, I believe, is a picture of the Messiah who will come, that he is a son of God, that Yehovah has chosen him. And I know for my Jewish brothers and sisters who are hearing this, we don't talk about this in the synagogue. This is a difficult concept for some Jews, but it shouldn't be, because we definitely have this idea in, for example, Deuteronomy 14, where Yehovah says, "You are sons of God," you mean to all of Israel. And it explains what that means. It means you're holy. It means you're chosen. And what he's saying here is the King Messiah, who will come from the line of David, will be God's chosen son.
Give God praise.
Amen.
Let me tell you something interesting you said about this. You said for Jews sometimes that this is a difficult concept.
Right.
And I remember one of the things that you and I did a long time ago in Nehemia when we were writing our book, A Prayer to Our Father, Hebrew origins of the Lord's Prayer. The first part, it said Our Father, and you're like, okay, well, I don't care about that section. Let's
move on quickly.
Let's move on quickly. That's a Christian concept with Father, until we did what? We opened up the book, we opened up the Bible, and we started seeing over and over again of Yehovah being a father, and the name Father being, the title Father being given to different people. And I think what I appreciate about what you're saying right now is that there are some things that are uncomfortable. Okay, so he's talking about a son. Well, wait, is that a concept that's okay for us? Well, it's right here. It's right here in the Scripture. So I think we got to let the Scripture speak, and then we go from there.
All right, can we read verse 16?
Yes.
Or did you have something on this verse?
No, go ahead.
All right, go ahead. You read verse 16.
No. What I liked was verse 15. It says, "But my loving kindness shall not depart from him, as I took it away from Saul, whom I removed from before you. Your house and your kingdom shall endure before me forever. Your throne shall be established for a couple thousand years."
Until we go to establish a different religion. No, it's forever.
It's forever.
Wow.
Yeah. In accordance with all these words and all this vision, so Nathan spoke to David. I think that's pretty amazing.
I think this is amazing. Here, this is an amazing path, and I know we had to run through it, but I do think we hit the key points, and there's a bunch of other points. Obviously, I want to encourage people, go study this for yourself and post your comments on nehemiaswall.com and Keith's website, bfainternational.com, on the section related to this week's portion, and share what you've learned, please. You know, this is go do your homework and you know, share what you've learned.
I want to do something. I want people, you know, normally we stop and we talk about our ministries and we talk about, you know, what we're doing. And I'm sure some people are like, okay, let me get through that part. But you know what, Nehemia, let's just be honest. We were talking about this. I was actually talking to Nehemia's mother about this, the significance of what ministry is and how, I know we talked about it a few weeks ago, but again, how many people that we have that are listening or that are being engaged by what we're doing. And I don't look at it as a way for let's stick out our chest and talk about how many people. But I think it's a really amazing thing that right now we can be here doing this recording, push a button, and this information goes literally around the world. I mean,
it's humbling.
It's humbling.
It's so humbling.
I mean, think about that. I mean, literally, we don't have to talk about the statistics, but there are thousands of people who are going to sit and listen for 45 minutes to an hour on this. And I would like to say to you, thank you for continuing to keep the position of giving access to the information. Some people will be like, well, Keith, you know, give us more of your perspective, or Nehemia, you know, beat up the Christians, do something with the Jews. I just think this is a blessing to let the Word of God speak. I just think this is a blessing.
Well, it really is the picture of Amos 3:3, coming together on the common ground of the Word of God.
Yeah. So I want to say, you know, again, our ministries, we have two different ministries. I'll let you talk about your ministry, bfainternational.com. It was established really as a result of a meeting with you where I was sitting across from that place and seeing again those big stones and thinking, what would it be like to have that kind of a biblical foundation for people's faith? That's really what this whole thing is about for me. And I just have to say, all these years later, I mean, I'm just sitting here thinking, wow, it's happening. It's actually happening. Yeah. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I know. Well, my ministry, McCourt Hebrew Foundation, people go to my website, nehemiaswall.com, sign up for my free newsletter, get the weekly updates. I just want to, that's the plug for the ministry. I want to go talk about something. You know, you talked about how we you know, your ministry was founded when we went to the Western Wall together, and there were the giant stones, and you wanted that to be, you know, there were the foundation stones, and that gave you this image of, you know, the Biblical Foundations Academy. You know, I know for me, I go to the Western Wall and stand before these ancient stones. They've been there for thousands of years, and they were put on the spot where Zerubbabel before him had built the temple, and on the spot where Solomon before him had built the temple. And I stand there and I'm like, I'm standing here at the place where where Jeremiah walked down this street and David walked down that street. And it really, to me, it's like unbelievable. I'm you know, and now I'm thinking about the Ark traveling around. I don't know if I told you about this place, but there is this one particular place in Israel where there's an ancient bridge, and it's exactly in the area where geographically where the Philistines, when they left the battlefield at Ebenezer, they would have crossed that bridge over this Nahal, over this, you know, wadi, and maybe it's not the same bridge because the bridge has been replaced, but the bridge would have been at that site, at that spot.
Why haven't we gone there?
I don't know. We can go there. Yeah. And I remember going on a hike and going over that bridge and thinking, like, I am passing over the exact spot where the Ark, which is called by the name of Yehovah, passed. And it's just amazing being here in the land. And in a sense, it's really empowering. Like I said, my ministry is about empowering people with information. I know I'm empowered when I go to these biblical spots and I say, you know what? I don't need any rabbi to be my intermediary. I don't need any rabbi to be, you know, my interpreter. Here I can interact directly with the creator of the universe by you know, going to the places that he talks about in Scripture and reading those biblical passages and just being moved by it. I mean, I believe that is the spirit of Yehovah. Yehovah is doing things. You know, we read a few weeks ago about, you know, how David, by the Spirit, you know, had this, you know, this knowledge, and I believe Yehovah is doing things with His Spirit now for the people of Israel, for the people around the world. In fact, there's David's out there, and there's Obed Edom, the Gittites out there. And I think this is such an era of blessing that we live in, where we have this opportunity.
Well, do us a favor, folks. Share Prophet Pearls with people. There's no requirement. There's no registration. You can click on nehemiaswall.com, bfainternational.com, and you can listen to, now I think we have, up to this point, 24 or so of these things that have been done. We're going to get to all the way to 54. We got a big process ahead of us, 2 or 3 of these a day. I'm not feeling the best, but I will say when we open up the Bible and we start talking, I start feeling better. And then as soon as it's done, I feel bad again.
I'm going to collapse.
So you got to pray for us, Nehemia, to end. But is there anything you'd like to say before we end this section?
Let's close it out. Yehovah, thank you so much for bringing us here to Jerusalem, to this place, so close to the place where you put your name forever, to the Temple Mount, in the city of Jerusalem. We're here in Jerusalem, and in this cave, in this little apartment in a sub basement. But it's such a blessing to be here of all places, to have this opportunity to come before you and speak about your word, and for that word to go around the world. And, we have the verse where it says the Torah shall go forth from Zion, and to be part of that.
Yes.
To be part of nations, people coming from all the nations, as it says in Isaiah 2, and for then the Torah to go forth from Zion. I am so humbled by this, Yehovah, and so grateful for you for sharing your blessing, for sharing your name with your people and your Torah, this amazing blessing you've given to us, this Torah, and these prophets, these revelations are such a beautiful blessing, a gift to the world, Yehovah. I'm so grateful for this gift. Yehovah, I pray that you, like in the time of David, you give us rest from our enemies round about, and that you, as it says here in the book of Samuel, that there will be the one who you choose as your son, who is from the line of David, who is a descendant of David. Yehovah, please bring your chosen son and rebuild the house of David soon in our days, Yehovah. Yehovah, please let all mankind know that you, Yehovah, are Elohim, that you are the one and only, and let all mankind know your Son, the one you have chosen and will send to the world to defeat the enemies of Israel, to gather in the exiles. The exiles of Israel, and the ones who are exiled, like Obed-Edom the Gittite and Ittai the Gittite, to bring them to you out of the spiritual exile in which they are in, and to bring world peace, Yehovah, so that the swords are beaten into plowshares. And may this be soon, Yehovah. Amen.
Thank you for listening to Prophet Pearls with Nehemia Gordon and Keith Johnson. For more information, please visit nehemiaswall.com and bfainternational.com.